in the video that he sent me, which is very strange, and it's all about his kind of personal grievances with a particular ex-Muslim NGO. But then the video is actually done in the style by AI of Elon Musk giving a speech about this guy's life. So
now, just going back to the main breaking news, of course, at least 5 people have sadly died after a car drove through crowds at a Christmas party in Magdeburg, Germany. It's believed that a further 200 people have been injured. The suspect involved is believed to be a 50-year-old doctor originally from Saudi Arabia, and he was arrested at the scene. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is in the town and has spoke of the need to stand together and to show solidarity with the families of the victims. Now, James Jackson is a reporter who's joining us from Germany, and he's previously he personally has actually been sent a manifesto written by the suspect prior to this incident. And so he's here to give us the latest updates. James, thanks for coming on the show.
thanks for having me.
Okay, James, what do we know so far?
So I think this is actually a very strange attack. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has called it a crazy action. And, considering similar attacks having taken place in Germany 8 years ago at Breitscheidplatz in Berlin, an attack on a Christmas market, and then an attack on a festival, you may assume that the motive would be Islamist or Islamic extremist. But I think all evidence that we've seen so far indicates the exact opposite. This person was very well known online. The suspected terrorist attacker was very well known online as an ex-Muslim. There's actually been reports by the BBC into an NGO that he set up to help ex-Muslims come as refugees from Saudi Arabia. He appears to have been radicalized and believed that Germany was Islamizing Europe, which is obviously complete nonsense. And there are questions about whether this even indicates mental illness. But of course, and another further point, in the video that he sent me, which is very strange, and it's all about his kind of personal grievances with a particular ex-Muslim NGO. But then the video is actually done in the style by AI of Elon Musk giving a speech about this guy's life. So some quite bizarre stuff. At the time of the attack, he published a video on his Twitter in which it was very long and rambling, but towards the end, he says, the German people and German citizens, the German nation will pay for how they've treated me. He appears to have had some problems with the police, and he's been promising revenge for almost a year now. How this person who had 40,000 followers on Twitter wasn't picked up by the security services, sometimes tweeting his threats and rages, rants out in German, as well as Arabic and English even. And of course, one of the great ironies of this huge tragic event where so many people were celebrating, have been injured, up to 200 people injured, and 5 right now reported dead. Of course, the AfD, the far-right party, initially said, when will this madness end? Just a few days ago, the suspected attacker was actually tweeting out endorsements for the leader of the Alternative for Germany, AfD, Alice Weidel. Of course, this is happening in an election campaign. I heard you had a former CNN editor earlier who said this might benefit the AfD. I don't think it will, actually, because German media has been very on top of reporting that this was actually a sort of crazed anti-Muslim,
Quite, yes, no, definitely the story has changed as it's been developing. But I suppose there was that sort of news void, and the preliminary information about him was the information that people first encountered. Is there, are you finding that issue with social media that often occurs whereby the first story is often the dominant perception? Do you think that the reality of this news will catch up to people's first hunches about what had happened?
I certainly hope so, because it would be unfair if we just let the people speculate and assume based on previous similar attacks. Of course, there are a lot of conspiracy theories going around saying he wasn't actually an ex-Muslim. He was, a sleeper cell agent, or of course, there's no evidence for that. He seemed to be very convinced ex-Muslim, but very radicalized. I mean, actually, just 5 days ago, he gave an interview to a American anti-Muslim think tank where he said Germany is kind of trying to Islamize Europe by importing Muslim Syrians, but not letting in enough ex-Muslim Saudis. So he seems to be really driven by personal grievances, by things that attack that affect him, which could be in, maybe is common with certain terrorists, but also show that it's very much different from the profile of a Islamic State supporter or an Islamic extremist of any kind. Of course, the first things that were reported were that he was a Saudi national. But then a 50-year-old one who worked as a doctor and has been in Germany since 2006. So he clearly didn't fit the normal profile. He was from an Arabic country, but his naturalized German citizen, doctor, not a sort of angry young man, which usually are responsible for these kinds of attacks. So, a lot of security experts have said, I've never seen anything like it. And I have to say, personally, I'm really shocked because I received this message from him. I thought it was strange. I sent him a comment back, and I didn't think that much more about it. Of course, he didn't have, in the video which he sent me, there were no indications of violence, no threats. He was complaining about how he'd been treated by the police. In the video he put up yesterday, which was actually strangely just after the attack, so perhaps he scheduled a tweet, he was complaining again about the police allegedly hacking or stealing from his postbox. There's no evidence that that's the case. He seemed to have had some legal problems with the police in Germany. That's surprisingly common here because, the way speech is regulated is quite different. If you insult someone online, they can sue you. It can be quite a frustrating experience. But of course, that blaming the German nation for your legal case is just absolutely absurd. And I think, Olaf Scholz is right, the Chancellor, to call it a awful and crazy action.
So, James, you mentioned there that you yourself were in receipt of this manifesto. So I guess the question that will always sadly be asked in the aftermath of an event like this is, do the security forces have questions to answer themselves? Not least that German markets are usually protected by crash barriers, obviously after the terrible incident in 2016 in Berlin. So there's the issue of whether the crash barriers were active, but also that this person seems to have had a lot of information and a lot of grievances in the public domain, which evidently haven't appeared on anybody's radar.
Exactly. I think the German security services have huge questions to answer, especially as Germany has seen a number of terrorist attacks, both ones that have been taken out and ones that were prevented by the security services. And, this man had 40,000 followers on Twitter. There are reports that people had actually told the Interior Ministry, the Immigration Ministry, as well as Berlin police about him because he was well known in the ex-Muslim community as well as among Saudi immigrants to Germany for this kind of violent language, which he had no fear about, broadcasting to his 40,000 followers, some of whom were also journalists. I have to say I didn't follow him back after his strange video he sent me. But the security services seem to have massively failed here. And one thing I would point out, actually, because I cover a lot of these attacks, quite often when you see an actual arrest or an attack prevented, there'll be a line in there saying, this came after a tip from a foreign security service. So we really have to ask ourselves, is the German security service a weak link in Europe? And is that actually making us all unsafer?
Okay, well, that was James Jackson, there, reporter, joining us from Germany with fascinating insight into what is a developing situation. And obviously, we'll be keeping you up to date with that as news breaks.